What if I told you that one of the richest countries on Earth had absolutely nothing to start with? 60 years ago, Singapore was a tiny island with no oil, no farmland, no rivers, no mountains, and no natural resources of any kind. It was a swampy fishing village sitting at the bottom of the Malay Peninsula, so small you could drive across the entire country in under an hour. When it was suddenly pushed out of Malaysia in 1965, its first prime minister, Kuan Yew, cried on live television. Not from joy, from fear. He genuinely did not know if this little island could survive. But survive it did. And not just survive. Singapore today is home to one of the highest incomes per person on the entire planet. Its port is one of the busiest in the world. Its airport has won the title of best in the world more times than any other. Its schools rank at the very top globally, and its financial district stands shoulder to shoulder with New York, London, and Tokyo. So how did a nation with nothing become a nation with everything? That is exactly what we are going to unpack today. 10 powerful reasons behind one of the greatest economic transformations in human history. Stay with me, because this story will change how you think.
Point 1. A leader who refused to accept limits. Every great transformation starts with one person who refuses to accept that things have to stay the way they are. For Singapore, that person was Kuan Yew. When independence was forced upon Singapore in 1965, Lee did not sit around waiting for help. He looked at his tiny island and asked a radical question. What do we have that nobody else has? The answer he came up with was location. Singapore sits right at the crossroads of global trade between the East and the West. Every ship sailing between Europe and Asia had to pass through the Strait of Malacca, and Singapore was sitting right next to it, like a toll booth on a busy highway. Lee understood that geography was not just a map fact, it was a business opportunity. He immediately started building infrastructure to take advantage of this. He invested in port facilities, runways, and roads. He told foreign businesses that Singapore was open, safe, and ready to work. He made it clear that corruption would not be tolerated, contracts would be honored, and the rule of law would be absolute. In a region where many governments were unstable and unpredictable, Singapore became the trustworthy partner every international company was looking for. One determined leader with a clear vision planted the seed that would grow into an empire.
Point 2. Turning corruption into a relic of the past. Speaking of corruption, let us talk about why that single decision was one of the most powerful economic moves Singapore ever made. In many developing countries, corruption eats away at growth like termites in a wooden house. Businesses have to pay bribes just to get permits. Contracts go to connected friends instead of the best people. Money that should build roads and schools disappears into private pockets. Kuan Yew knew this would destroy Singapore before it ever got started. So he did something bold. He paid government officials well, really well. Singapore's public servants are among the highest paid in the world. The logic was simple and brilliant. If a government minister earns a salary that matches what they could earn in the private sector, the temptation to steal is dramatically reduced. On top of high salaries, Singapore created the Corrupt Practices Investigation Bureau, a powerful agency with real teeth. People who took bribes went to prison. No exceptions. No quiet deals, no looking the other way. Even friends of the government were prosecuted. The message to the world was crystal clear. Singapore is a place where the rules apply to everyone equally. That reputation became worth billions. Multinational corporations chose Singapore precisely because they knew their investments were safe. Clean governance was not just the right thing to do, it was the smartest economic strategy they could have chosen.
Point 3. Building a world-class port from scratch. Now, here is where the geography advantage truly kicks into high gear. Singapore had one massive card to play, and it played it beautifully: trade. The island sits at the southern tip of the Malay Peninsula, where the Indian Ocean meets the South China Sea. Nearly 40% of all global trade passes through the waters near Singapore every single year. But having ships pass nearby means nothing if you cannot get them to stop. So Singapore invested heavily and relentlessly in its port. Today, the Port of Singapore handles over 37 million containers every year. That is more than most countries produce in total economic output. Ships from over 600 ports in 120 countries dock there. It operates 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, 365 days a year without stopping. The efficiency is extraordinary. Cranes load and unload ships with such speed.
Point 4. Creating a tax haven that played by the rules. You might have heard of tax havens and pictured shady offshore accounts in faraway islands. Singapore took a completely different approach. It created a business-friendly tax environment that was legal, transparent, and respected internationally. The corporate tax rate in Singapore sits at 17%, which is far lower than in the United States, the United Kingdom, Germany, or Japan. There are also significant tax breaks for businesses that set up their regional headquarters in Singapore, for companies that invest in research and development, and for startups in their early years. This was not about helping people hide money. It was about making Singapore the most attractive place in Asia for a business to plant its flag. And it worked spectacularly. Today, over 7,000 multinational companies have their regional or global headquarters in Singapore. Names like Google, Apple, Facebook, Goldman Sachs, and Standard Chartered all have major operations there. When a global company sets up in Singapore, it does not just pay taxes. It brings high-paying jobs, transfers knowledge and skills to local.
Point 5. Betting everything on education. While the port and the tax policies were building wealth at the top, Singapore was quietly building something that most leaders miss. A country with no resources has only one asset that truly matters: human beings. If the people are smart, skilled, disciplined, and creative, they will find a way to generate wealth no matter what the circumstances. So Singapore invested in education like its life depended on it, because it did. Schools were built, teachers were paid well and respected deeply. Students were pushed hard. The curriculum was demanding, rigorous, and focused on maths, science, and languages. English was made the language of instruction, which gave every Singaporean child direct access to global knowledge and global opportunity. The results were staggering. Today, Singapore consistently ranks number 1 or number 2 in global education rankings for reading, maths, and science. Children in Singapore outperform students from the United States, the United Kingdom, and most of Europe. But beyond test scores, Singapore built a workforce that global companies actually want to hire. A workforce that is disciplined, multilingual, technically skilled, and culturally aware. Education was not just a social good, it was the engine of economic growth.
Point 6. Housing everyone and building national pride. Here is something that surprises most people when they first hear it. About 80% of Singaporeans live in public housing built and managed by the government. And these are not cramped, depressing tower blocks. They are clean, well-maintained, affordable apartments in well-designed communities with parks, schools, shops, and transport links right outside the door. The Housing Development Board, known as the HDB, was set up in the 1960s, and it transformed Singapore in ways that go far beyond simply putting roofs over heads. First, it solved the problem of urban slums overnight. When Singapore gained independence, thousands of people lived in dangerous, unhygienic squatter settlements. The HDB cleared those settlements and moved families into proper homes.
Second, and this is the brilliant part, Singaporeans are allowed to buy their HDB flats using money from their national savings scheme called the Central Provident Fund. So owning a home builds personal wealth at the same time. Third, every HDB block is deliberately designed to house people of different races and religions side by side. In a country with Chinese, Malay.
Point 7. The airport that became a national identity. If the port is Singapore's connection to the sky, and what a connection it is. Changi Airport has been voted the best airport in the world for 12 consecutive years by Skytrax, the most respected airline industry rating organization. But calling Changi just an airport is like calling the Eiffel Tower just a metal structure. Changi is an experience. It has a butterfly garden, a sunflower garden, a movie theater, a swimming pool, a rooftop cactus garden, and one of the most spectacular indoor waterfalls ever built, dropping 40 meters inside a domed structure called the Jewel. You can get a massage, eat at a Michelin-starred restaurant, or watch a free film while you wait for your connecting flight. Why does an airport need all of this? Because Singapore understood that an airport is not just transport infrastructure. It is a brand statement. Every traveler who passes through Changi walks away thinking that Singapore is extraordinary, efficient, beautiful, and ahead of the rest of the world. And they are right. Changi handles over 65 million passengers every year. More than 110 airlines fly there. It connects Singapore to destinations around the globe. And every one of those passengers is a potential investor.
Point 8. Reinventing itself every decade. One of the most fascinating things about Singapore is that it never gets comfortable. Just when you think it has found its winning formula, it upgrades. When low-cost manufacturing was booming in the 1970s, Singapore went all in on making electronics and chemicals. When neighboring countries started undercutting those industries with cheaper labor in the 80s and 90s, Singapore did not panic. It moved up the value chain into financial services, biotechnology, and advanced engineering. When the 2000s brought a new era of global finance, Singapore built one of the most sophisticated financial centers in the world, attracting hedge funds, private banks, and asset managers from around the globe. Today, Singapore is reinventing itself again around technology, artificial intelligence, digital finance, and green energy. The government runs something called the Economic Development Board, which is essentially a team of brilliant planners who are always asking the question, where will the world be in 10 years, and how do we position Singapore to benefit from that? This willingness to let go of what worked before and embrace what will work next is extraordinarily rare in any government, anywhere. Most countries protect old industries long past their expiry date. Singapore buries them quickly and builds new ones in their place. The result is a country that is always relevant, always competitive, and always surprising.
Point 9. Making Singapore a safe haven for global wealth. In the last 2 decades, Singapore has quietly become one of the top destinations in the world for private wealth. Ultra-high net worth individuals from all over the globe, from Indonesia to India to Europe to the Middle East, have moved their money and their families to Singapore. Why? Because Singapore offers something that is increasingly rare in the modern world: stability. Political stability, legal stability, financial stability. The courts are independent and respected. Property rights are protected absolutely. The banking system is among the safest and most regulated in the world. Capital can flow in and out freely without restrictions. And the quality of life for wealthy families is extraordinary. World-class international schools, world-class hospitals, some of the lowest crime rates on the planet, clean streets, clean air, and a government that actually works. The numbers tell the story. Singapore manages over $5 trillion in assets across its banking and financial sector. Family offices managing generational wealth have been setting up in Singapore at a breathtaking pace.
When Russia, China, Hong Kong, and other places became more politically uncertain, Singapore was the #1 alternative. It did not just benefit from global instability. It had spent decades building exactly the kind of place people run to when the world gets unstable. That preparation paid off beyond anything the founders could have imagined.
Point 10. A small country with an enormous mindset. And here we arrive at perhaps the deepest secret of all, the one that ties everything else together. Singapore does not think like a small country. It has always thought like an empire. From the very first days of independence, its leaders refused to accept the limits that geography, size, or lack of resources should logically have imposed. Where others saw a tiny island with no hinterland, Singapore saw a global hub with access to every hinterland at once. Where others saw a population of just under 6 million as too small to matter, Singapore saw a talent pool that could be trained, focused, and multiplied by attracting talent from everywhere else. Where others built walls to protect their culture and economy, Singapore built bridges and invited the world in. This mindset produced policies that would have been unthinkable in most countries. It welcomed immigrants who had skills the country needed. It sent its best students abroad to the finest universities, trusting they would come home and contribute. It partnered with countries that others considered rivals. It benchmarked itself not against its neighbors, but against the very best in the entire world. The result is a country where the national question is never, how do we get by? It is always.
We started this journey in a fishing village with no resources, no safety net, and a leader crying on television from fear. And we end it in one of the most prosperous, respected, and admired nations on the face of the earth. What Singapore built is not just an economy. It is a proof of concept, a living, breathing answer to the question of what is possible when leadership is honest, vision is long-term, people are genuinely invested in, and a country refuses to be defined by what it lacks. The lessons here are not just for governments. They are for every single one of us. What you do not have cannot stop you. What you choose to build always can. Singapore chose integrity over corruption, education over ignorance, openness over fear, long-term thinking over short-term comfort. And the world took notice. If this story lit something up inside you the way it lit something up in me, I want to hear about it. Drop a comment below and tell me which of these 10 points hit you the hardest. If you found value in this video, please give it a thumbs up, because it genuinely helps this channel reach more people who love stories like this one. And if you are not subscribed yet, hit that subscribe button right now. We have so many more incredible stories of transformation, vision, and human possibility coming your way. See you in the next one.